the music?
Lifetime of memories are awakened.
Nervous, watching, it's starting up again. Pulses racing, you're moving on ahead.
Heroes. Villains.
It's a red card for David Beckham. Pictures tell the story.
And a legacy of champions. Today in Moscow, 32 nations discover their fates.
Ronaldo, what a finish! Great goal, Paul Pogba!
As the groups for the 2018 FIFA World Cup are revealed. Next on FS1.
Excellent. Okay, everybody, calm down. So please welcome Kevin Callahan and David Neal from Fox Sports. So I think I invited you guys to do this probably about 5 or 6 months ago, right? And leaving aside what we all thought would happen with the U.S. team, I also did it before you might have realized that the world broadcast meetings were in Russia last week, because I thought, I'm not going to go revisit because they may want to say, we're going to be jet lagged like you wouldn't believe. So when were the meetings? They were last week in Moscow?
They finished last, for us, Wednesday, I guess. Yeah. Kevin and I do our best work when we're jet lagged, so it's good. This works out well.
Exactly. You got to get used to it now,
Exactly.
right? So what was your take on those meetings last week? And, maybe fill people in on what exactly happens at those meetings.
Yeah, it's a really interesting collection of people and organizations, over 200 broadcasters from around the world, all rights holders for the World Cup through FIFA. HBS, which is run by the legendary Francis Tellier, and Dan Miodovnik is his number 2. They do a fabulous job. They put on a 2-day, what they call the plenary session, where all the rights holders are in a room similar to this. And HBS rolls out all of their coverage plans, which are beyond impressive. They're staggering almost. And then FIFA and the LOC, the local organizing committee, they come through and they lay out their plans for venue operations, for schedules, for the look of the games, all of those kind of things. And it really is, in a lot of ways, if you're not prepared for it going in, it's a little bit like drinking from a fire hose, because there's so much information being downloaded. And then after that, they do unilateral sessions where you go in and you spend an hour with FIFA, then you spend an hour with HBS and talk about your individual needs and plans and questions and things. A lot of information. It was 20 degrees and snowing every day. So we had no doubt that we were in Russia. We knew that for sure.
So how different, when I saw Dan at the Women's World Cup in Canada, and I know talking with you both, and he was saying how, you kind of do that and you kind of try to figure out lessons to be applied to the Men's World Cup, and Dan was like, it is a whole different ball game on the men's level. So what were some of the things that you found interesting as far as men's versus women's, as far as that scale of what it's all about?
With the men's tournament, everything is so much bigger. Anything that they had in the women's tournament, just multiply it by realistically a factor of 20 in terms of the number of feeds that are available to rights holders, to the number of rights holders that are present both at the IBC and at the venues themselves. Everything it ends up being a much better produced tournament. They've made lots of strides with their coverage, and they've stepped up, the 2 tournaments we've been in with them so far. Everyone said it's by far the most they've ever done for Women's World Cup and the most they've ever done for Confederations Cup. And now it's the same thing. This is going to be the most they've ever done for a World Cup.
So David, obviously your past experience with the Olympics, you've been part of the OBS kind of, which is a very similar workflow, I guess, where you guys will get blamed for the match coverage probably, just like you got blamed for Olympic coverage that you really almost had nothing to do with per se. So maybe a little bit of insights on the host model, because it's not really well known here in the States. Yeah,
a little different in that with the IOC at NBC, we would routinely put multiple unilateral cameras at various venues. In Beijing for swimming, Drew Esikoff and Tommy Roy, they had 11 cameras of their own. So some of the replays and things that you'd see from swimming were exclusive to NBC. FIFA has a different philosophy. They will not allow unilateral cuts or feeds or replays into their game coverage. They basically, They want you to see the same game coverage if you're in Duluth or Doha. They want it to be literally the only thing that's different is the Fox box, and what you can do is drop downs from the Fox box. And I see both points of view. For the IOC, they want the broadcasters to feel engaged, and as long as a rights holder you pay for it, they don't care if you want to put, Bucky Guntz routinely had more than 30 cameras at the opening ceremony. And that's why Bucky's cut of the opening ceremony was superior to anything else in the rest of the world. And the IOC is fine with that. With FIFA wants the same game coverage, and frankly, I don't blame them. They are the absolute gold standard. HBS will have 8 coverage teams out there, production teams. They call them the dream team, and they really are. They're all European, which is not surprising. Their baseline coverage is 37 cameras. That's from match 1 in group play, right through to the semis and the finals. So their coverage level is so good that I don't really fault them at all for saying, we don't want any individual rights holder to mess with the game coverage. You can do whatever you want in your shoulder programming, but I see both points of view.
Right. So as far as the, I guess the big exciting development, talking to you a couple years back, and your plan, your wish list, was obviously as big as Russia is as a country, there's really only one specific place that people would say, where would you want to put the studio? Like here in the U.S., you would say we could go New York, you could go L.A., you could go, down in Florida, wherever you want to go. Russia, it's really about Red Square. And I know maybe you can give us some background on that process, because obviously, again, the World Cup kicks off on June 14th, same day as the U.S. Open will be taking place, right? So interesting weekend for you guys. But the month before that is, of course, the May Day Parade. So maybe walk through this interesting process for the last couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, the trip that we just made was my 16th trip to Russia throughout the whole process. And, from day one, I think David really wanted to be in Red Square. When you think about Moscow, when you think about Russia as an American, you really focus on Red Square, and that's what really truly identifies it. So to us and to the network, it was very important.
Yeah, and Kevin's right. It's the one iconic look that for an American television viewer, you're immediately going to know where you are, where this event is coming from. It will imbue our coverage with authenticity from the beginning. We're doing over 300 hours of television, and that means that more than half of our coverage is not game coverage. It's studio coverage. So every hour of television that we do from Russia will come from Red Square. And I think you've got a rendering here somewhere that we can put up for a second.
We don't have that, unfortunately, but I hear that's good for it may be a good thing we don't have it, but
yeah.
Unfortunately,
Okay.
we thought we had it.
Okay. It will be readily apparent. The main cover shot has St. Basil's Cathedral, and off to the left is the Kremlin. It's very clear where you are when you see this on screen.
They always say that camera adds 10 pounds, and I think when I look at images of Red Square, I think the camera adds about 10 acres, because when you get there, it's not as big as it appears on TV. You don't picture how this massive parade could go through. So how did you kind of deal with just where you're going to be placed, and again with the parade coming through there and the concerns about setup? In any big event that you do over a number of years, you'll come up with certain go-to stories that the group will know. So we've got one of our go-to stories is the Louis Vuitton bag story. If you've ever been in Red Square, one of the borders of Red Square is this enormous department store called the GUM. And one of the anchor tenants in the GUM is a Louis Vuitton store. So we were told this story by Russian government officials that 2 or 3 years ago, the Louis Vuitton people put in an application to put up a pop-up museum. They said it was going to be a museum to luggage, which who wouldn't want to go to a luggage museum? There's one downtown. I hear it's very good.
There you
My
go.
parents went to it.
Believe it or not,
They loved it. Louis Vuitton is Louis Vuitton.
So there you go. So they received permission to build this luggage museum. When it's unveiled, it turns out that it is a gigantic Louis Vuitton bag, probably about, what do you think?
I think it was 50 meters by 100 meters.
Yeah, gigantic. This did not conform to the application that was submitted to the government. And one of the people from the government pointed to a window in the Kremlin that directly overlooks Lenin's mausoleum right into Red Square, and pointed out that that was the office that Putin had chosen, because each leader can choose different parts of the Kremlin. He has a direct view out onto the Kremlin and to the Red Square area. And as the government officials told us, the Louis Vuitton bag was a surprise to the president, and the president doesn't like surprises. So the Louis Vuitton bag was gone in 36 hours. So that's a way of saying that we've gone through every vetting process, every approval process. We've wanted to make sure that there was no surprise when our set was erected. I think we've been through 9 different versions. Gary?
We're on 11.
Oh, we're on 11.
The one we have is 11.
Yeah, all right. It's terrific, but again, it's been fully vetted by the government because we don't want...
The president has signed off.
He has, yes.
He's a man of his word, from what I understand.
Yeah. And one of the things that was... One of the things that was really important to us was to have our own space and to have our own look and not just have a multilateral type position. So through the work of going over there multiple times and working with HBS and FIFA, we're within the footprint, but we have our own structure, we have our own look, so it'll have some of that Fox branding to it.
So I know that in Brazil, I know you guys were down there and we ran into each other a couple times. So the ESPN, they were part of that big Copacabana studio assembly. So will there be other broadcasters on site as well in Red Square?
Yeah, there will be, and to Kevin's point, what HBS and FIFA have done this time is to combine everybody in one zone, which I think is really better. You know, we emulated the really terrific idea that ESPN had for the Men's World Cup. At the Women's World Cup in Vancouver, we had a standalone area that was not adjacent to any other broadcaster. In this case, you know, obviously being in Red Square is not, you know, we're not the only ones who are going to think of that idea. There are other broadcasters who want to be there as well. So I think it works well that we have our own footprint, our own distinctive look and feel, but at the same time we're in a compound where HBS and FIFA are controlling access, controlling back of house, all of that. And I think it actually works out best, particularly in Russia.
So is it one story, 2, 3? I mean, I know that you were beautiful in Vancouver with 2 stories.
It's one story, but you know, as we all know in this business, ceiling height is one of the big things you got to have for a studio. So we actually have a structure that would be large enough for other broadcasters to have 2 floors, but we decided that the ceiling height for lighting and scenery and all that was more important. So,
gotcha. So Kevin, maybe a little bit about the ecosystem of the IBC, California, and then anywhere else in the U.S. that you might be doing stuff, and then also at the venue. So what's the ecosystem for your coverage?
So we look at it that we really have 15 venues. We have the 12 match venues, we have Red Square, we have the IBC, and we have Los Angeles. Much like we did with Women's World Cup in Vancouver, all of our edit operations will be back in Los Angeles. We did a lot of testing during Confederations Cup as well, and we're taking advantage of some of what we found there. The IBC will be our hub for everything. All of the venues will come back into the IBC, and then the content either gets incorporated into our studio shows there or gets passed on to the States. We're not having a control room at Red Square. Our control room will be at the IBC. So we're essentially doing what we would refer to as a home run production from Red Square all the way back to the IBC, which is 12 kilometers or an hour and a half. And for us, it makes sense. It gives us access to all of the feeds that are available. You know, what we learned when we did Women's World Cup, our studio location and our control room were out at Jackpool Plaza, which was a great location and afforded us all the space that we needed, but our producers couldn't see all of the feeds. They didn't have the daily interaction with the other broadcasters that goes on at the IBC, and that's really important to being able to tell a good story and be able to have all of the content. So by putting the control room at the IBC, they're able to do that. We sacrifice the daily ability for face-to-face interaction with the talent, but we're able to do that with video conferencing and that sort of thing between the 2 locations.
Could you ever conceivably have done that from California, from LA?
We're doing that for potentially for one of our shows. In order to get the immersed in the World Cup experience, the World Cup environment, you need to be there in the country. Like, you need to sit there, you need to have the interaction with the other broadcasters. Because part of what also goes on at those world broadcast meetings is you develop relationships and partnerships with other broadcasters. Because it's so invaluable, because those other broadcasters will get better access to their teams than we could ever hope to get.
And also, if you accept the premise that as a good broadcaster, you're trying to create a magic carpet ride for the viewer every day and take them to Russia, let them experience what it's like. It's pretty difficult to achieve that, to Kevin's point, if you're sitting in Southern California. You need to be on the ground there to really understand the vibe and understand the atmosphere and what's going on.
Right. So as far as those 12 venues, again, you have different time zones. How many different time zones? 4 in Russia? 4 or 5? Yeah.
Four for the venue.
So that'll lead to some confusion at least once, I'm going to assume. Someone's going to not know where they're supposed to go and catch their flight, and they're going to be an hour late or an hour short. But what are your end venue operations? Will be the same at each? Are you cookie cuttering for each of those venues? And
For 9 of the venues, we are. They'll be the same, and it's the same technology we rolled out during Confederations Cup, just on a larger scale. We're using all IP to transport video, audio, communications. It also gives us the ability to move data when we need to. For us, it proved really successful during Confederations Cup. And then actually everything from the IBC back to Red Square is also IP-based. Our transmission from IBC back to the States is primarily IP. There's some video circuits in there just for safety's sake, for redundancy. But just about everything we're doing, we're leveraging IP.
so I know World Cup, we're talking about things like match day -1, match day. So match day -1, what's the typical setup going to be, at a match where you guys are in? And let people understand what you have going on at the actual match.
So at the matches themselves, typically speaking, we're going to have, you'd have a commentator team, you'd have a pitch side reporter, or you'd have a reporter, and that reporter has the option of going to several different locations. And it's not like here in the States where we're the only broadcaster and we can go in and have the reporter go anywhere. Everything is a bookable service, and you can only go where HBS and FIFA tell you that you're allowed to go. The host provides all the cabling, and by that, basically you pay for the cabling, but you're not allowed to run the cabling yourself, which is a blessing and a curse when it comes to that. But we'll have a cabin, an 8 by 20 foot ground-based office container that will have 4 racks of equipment in it that will be able to handle all the communications we need, not only within the venue itself, but also back into the IBC and back into the States if needed.
It was amazing how small that technical footprint was when we went to go visit you guys.
Yeah, I mean, we've been working on it for a while to get it shrink down, but also to be able to incorporate all the functionality that we need and that our producers are asking for. It's really been a 2-year project, working with different manufacturers, different vendors, to get exactly what we need, so that the producers and commentators are as comfortable as they can be, similar to what we have in the States.
So now what's the off-tube situation as far as calling the matches? Because obviously soccer, much like American football, is kind of hard to call off-tube because you can't really see where players are off the screen. So how are you handling off-tube commentary?
Yeah, it's an art form, though, and I think in soccer you could argue that it is more advanced than in other sports. People like J.P. Dellacamera or Derek Ray, people like that, they probably do at least half of their matches in a given year. They do them off tube, so that's for them. They're used to it, and in some ways, even as a producer, I see the advantages of calling it off tube because it forces the commentators to speak only about what the viewer is seeing at home. If you're sitting in the actual stadium, you might see something off camera. And again, since we don't have any cameras that we control, you can't really start talking about some activity away from the ball because likely as not, you're not going to see it on screen. So it is such a accepted norm in soccer. And again, the commentators are quite well versed in doing it. I don't see it as a negative, really.
And is there a plan, how many matches will be done off-tube versus people in person? Or?
Yeah, we're still working on that. We're trying to hit the right balance. Some of it's a logistical exercise. Just the country, even though they focus the 11 venues in the sort of western third of the country, those distances are still pretty substantial. So now that we have the draw, we're trying to figure out who goes where.
And also, the host country always adds flights whenever there's a tournament. And we were all shocked to find out last week that the flights that they're adding will be announced in April. So we kind of have to wait for some of that to see what is logistically possible.
Right. I remember in Brazil, the frantic scramble for teams that went a little further in the tournament than they thought they would go, and their broadcasters would be like, we have no idea where to stay, how to get there. It was a bit of a mess. So hopefully those flights will still be available as things shift around. So I guess what the big news in terms of the production, all matches will be in UHD and HDR, right? I believe.
Yeah.
So do you have any plans that you can discuss as far as potentially carrying those? Well, in general, let's say how many matches are you playing on the broadcast network versus FS1?
More than half of the games will be on broadcast television. And the total number, which we haven't officially announced yet, but the total number we're going to carry on Big Fox is more than the previous 4 World Cups in the United States combined. So it's a massive number.
So you don't have, I'm guessing that's a little tricky with UHD and HDR since the local stations really can't carry UHD and HDR. But
To that point, right now, any match that's not on Big Fox will be available in UHD, HDR with wide color gamut through various of our MVPDs. Additionally, we're exploring, we've had a request from some of the MVPDs to do Atmos. It's being, HBS is providing the multi-channel audio content to create that, so we're exploring that to see if it's a possibility.
so that's similar to some of the experiments you've done with NASCAR, with some of the UHD and the HDR. That on FS1, you're kind of clear to do those things.
Correct.
Right, exactly. So also, I know that they're talking with Dan in Canada. Lots of experiments they did up there with 1080p, and they came away really sold on 1080p with HDR. What will that mean to the production? Because the basic level will be 1080p production, right? Every camera is at least 1080p. So how does it ripple through to you guys?
So we were actually a big proponent of that. Fox is a 720p network, so progressive. The standard in Russia will be 1080p 50. We have to convert down to 720p 60 for our home broadcast. For us, just dealing with the progressive format, the 1080p, it makes a much better cross conversion down to 720p 60. So we were really behind that. We were really glad that they went ahead and did that. All of our production facilities in Russia and in the states that are dealing with this content will be a 1080p facility.
Excellent. So I guess let's talk about the elephant in the room, I'd like to call it, which is Team USA disappointing everybody by not making it. How did that change? When that happened, I was like, oh man, you guys are in scramble mode, or how did what did you guys do to kind of recheck things and kind of redeploy your forces, if you will?
Well, it forced us to reevaluate the entire operating plan. Because it's the first reaction is to simply say, well, it's really only likely that costs us 3 matches, because the United States was not very good, as evidenced by the fact that they didn't qualify. So you play 3 matches in group stage, so unlikely to even expected that they would have advanced into the round of 16. Having said that, it would be naive to say that not having the United States there doesn't impact you at all, so of course it does. The interesting thing is there has been such great interest, and I would say concern, on the part of FIFA and HBS that this would somehow diminish our interest in covering this event, that they really, particularly at the World Broadcaster meeting last week, went out of their way to point out resources that effectively we've already paid for as part of our rights fee, things that can make us more efficient, can help us to be even more effective storytellers about the 32 teams, because here's my spin. We used to have 1 team. Now we have 32 teams to worry about. So in order to help us tell stories about the teams that will be there, HBS in particular showed us a lot of the resources that they already plan on deploying, and really wanted to make sure that we understood what they were, how facile they are in terms of our being able to use them, made connections for us with other broadcasters. And I have to say that the draw came out in a way that was about as perfect as you could envision given the circumstances with no United States team. Our big marketing push is going to be on the big 3. And I'm reminded with the NBA having been in here just before we walked in, back when I was at NBC and we enjoyed the 6 years of Michael Jordan and the Bulls, what made that a transcendent television property was Michael Jordan. It was the stars, Jordan and the Bulls, but it was Michael Jordan. We still have the 3 best players in the world. We've got Lionel Messi, we've got Cristiano Ronaldo, and we've got Neymar. And the way the draw came out, none of those guys play on the same day. They're spread pretty evenly through the 2 weeks of group stage. So really what our big emphasis in terms of storytelling, production, marketing, everything is on the big three, to try to get American viewers to the point where they don't want to be in line at Starbucks in the morning and have their friends say, hey, did you see what that Ronaldo guy did last night? And have them not be able to be conversant. We need to do everything we can to make it relevant in terms of pop culture, cover the heck out of it, bring those guys to life, make Messi be more than just a guy, make Ronaldo, Neymar, those guys, bring them to life with, Jen Pransky and our features unit are world class. They'll be able to do that. So, is it Clint Dempsey and Tim Howard? No. Do we wish it was? Sure. But we've got, sort of our soon now to not be internal joke anymore is that when the U.S. went out, we didn't lose any of the best players of the world. The best players of the world are all still there. And so that will be our focus now.
Well,
sorry, Claudia.
So what time will most of the matches air here in the States? Do you have it as far as on East Coast time?
We come on the air through group stage. We're on the air with a pregame show at 7 a.m. Eastern time. And then it starts at 8 and basically goes on 3-hour windows for the 3 or 4 games during the group stage.
So it works out nicely given that, NBC and even with you guys as far as a lot of European soccer coverage, people are used to watching soccer in the morning, so that should kind of work in a favor. So what's your sense on the casual fan then? Because the trick is, you could play to the hardcore fan because they're going to love this thing to death, even without the U.S. there. The casual fans, as you know from the Olympics, really easy when you can tell the mom and pop stories about someone from Minnesota making the figure skating team. So what's the trick there as far as getting casual fans to understand their relationship with these teams? And
it's really storytelling. Again, it goes back to Jen Pransky and the features unit. We need to bring these players to life. There are great stories there. The simple fact is, this is the world's most popular sport. It's the biggest event in the world for that most popular sport. There are 32 teams filled with personalities. And as we were mentioning earlier, HBS went out of their way to make sure that we understood where those resources are that we can turn into storytelling. What you need is to bring the players to life, give viewers at home a reason to care. If you can get them past the threshold of saying the United States is not there, but this is still one of the biggest things happening in the year 2018, get them interested, and then you need some luck. You need Messi to score a hat trick early on, or you need Ronaldo to do something outrageous, or Neymar, something like that. You need some buzz, some pop culture, and then we run with that.
Well, this really taps into your Olympic experience, though, because I think a lot of the beauty is that a lot of the criticism NBC always had was that there wasn't enough emphasis on the athletes from outside the U.S. Now you have obviously an opportunity to really dive into that and take the U.S. storytelling skills and apply them to these other players. A lot of people don't know who Neymar is, and they even don't know who Messi is. So, you have an opportunity here to really take these massive global brands and make them even bigger here in the U.S.
No, Ken, you're right. It's as simple as saying, hey, that number 10 guy is pretty good, Well, let's let people know what he's about, who he is. Yeah, any number of number 10s out there. Bring them to life. That really is. It goes back to that simple, premise from the Olympics and from World Cup. Give viewers a reason to care. Give them a rooting interest. It's a 32-day miniseries that we're rolling out. So it's not like we have to get them the first day. We have to start building that interest so that by game 2 or game 3, they start saying, wow, I really want to watch that game. I really care about Argentina or whomever.
So I know that obviously then you have the planning is already underway, I'm guessing, for next year, which will be in France. And the U.S. women's team's had some issues lately. Are they okay?
I think they're okay because I think what Jill Ellis, the head coach, has done brilliantly is that she has systematically said a fond farewell to the veteran older players. And if you look at the roster of the U.S. women's national team now, it is filled with young, dynamic players. I am extremely bullish on them. I think that Jill is a terrific coach. As we saw, Jill barely had over a year to take the team on in 15 and win the first World Championship in 16 years. So I'm very excited about the women's national team, very excited about the Women's World Cup. We have a tremendous location, thanks to our friend Tom Wood. We have a tremendous location already secured in Paris, which will also be, I would say, equally iconic. People will know immediately where we are. And, not to jinx it, I know the United States still has to qualify. So let's not take anything for granted. Let's make sure that Jill's got the team ready to play. But there's no doubt we're all looking forward to going into a World Cup where the United States is the defending world champion.
So you're obviously doing some planning on that now. So how do you what happens after? Do you wait until July 15th to really kind of hit that ground?
No. We really started about a year ago with that planning. We were lucky with the Women's World Cup in 15 in that we didn't have the men's tournament beforehand. Now we're kind of overlapping planning. The way that it works out, everything gets shipped. Everything has to be shipped by March 26th to Russia. So we're really starting mid-March to finalize the planning for Paris, because we need to be in that position where there are no surprises. Everything is done. All the orders that we need to have in place are done, so that when we come out on July 15th, August 1st, by the time we come back from vacation and everything, we're able to hit headlong into the Women's World Cup.
So then back to the whole redoing some of your operations with the U.S. team situation. So are you relying more on people back at home, or are people going to be doing a lot more work from the home office, if you will?
I mean, to the degree that we can leave our operations here in the U.S., which is pretty much industry standard now, whether it's the Olympics or the World Cup, we're going to do that. What our big emphasis, the number one priority was to maintain our location in Red Square. And number two is to do things that are not forward-facing. The more back-of-house operations we can safely and efficiently leave here in the U.S., then that's what we're doing.
Will you have studio operations from L.A., or are you going to try to do as much as you can to maximize that Red Square?
All of the studio that gets seen at home will be from Red Square. I think we've taken some lessons that we've learned from Confed Cup. We're able to do things a lot more efficiently. We are deploying some resources in Los Angeles, but it's things that are more forward-thinking and that will help us not only for the World Cup, not only for the Women's World Cup, but as a whole, that may benefit NFL or some of our other properties when it comes to making investments in the future.
So not to look forward too much to 2026, but there's the potential. The rumor is the potential is that this. First of all, it could be 40. We were talking about this last night. It could be 46 teams. Well, if it's here, you're talking about 90. Well, it'll be 92 matches. I think it's roughly double, right? Which is an amazing amount of matches.
It'll be less. It'll be in the 80s, because what they're doing is they're reducing group stage to 2 matches per team. So it's like 80.
2 matches per team.
Yeah,
that sounds
and you could be out fast.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
So, is there any sort of a silver lining to the U.S. men's team, and this is not really this is above your pay grade, not making it, and the fact of them having to reset and really kind of figure out what they want to be? You mentioned the women's team cleaning house. Do you see an opportunity here for the U.S. team to get positioned for 2026 with some of the players they have?
First, they got to qualify for 2022.
Yeah.
I think there's no doubt if you look at the results through qualifying for the U.S. men's national team, it was an aging team, and sometimes you do have to bottom out to rebuild. So Sunil Gulati just announced that he's not running for re-election as the head of U.S. Soccer. Obviously, Bruce Arena resigned. I think a lot of these players that we've gotten accustomed to seeing over the past few years are probably done playing at the elite level. So, yeah, I think that you have to believe that there's really nowhere to go but up. Right now, for a national team, hitting rock bottom is not qualifying for the World Cup. So, yeah, I'm a huge Dodger fan. I feel like the Dodgers are really close. They just lost Game 7. That's different. That's like, let's get back at them next year. This is different. For the U.S. national team, they really have to start all over again. New technical director, new head coach, all of that.
Right. And it could be worse. We could be Italian. So.